What the TPLF leadership is trying to do is to see if aligning, alliance with the Eritreans could save them from a real or perceived threat from the federal government. I will fight to the nail against my erstwhile comrades, because what they are trying to do is to invite the federal government to fight whatever war, whatever conflict it might have in Tigray, and that would only happen at the expense of the people of Tigray, at the expense of my sisters, at the expense of my brothers, at the expense of my parents.
Welcome to a very special episode of GPS, Global Powershift. I'm Jim Stenman here in Dubai, and I'm being joined by a very special guest, ጌታቸው Reda, who is a senior official within the Ethiopian government, and we're going to be talking about the Horn of Africa specifically today. It's a very interesting region. I obviously have family ties to Ethiopia. My mom is from that part of the world, and I've spent the last couple of years reconnecting with the Horn and Ethiopia in particular. So it's going to be fascinating to get ጌታቸው's thoughts on what's happening in Ethiopia and the region more widely. ጌታቸው, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into politics?
I went to law school. I grew up, was born and raised in Tigray, southern part of Tigray.
In northern Ethiopia?
Northern Ethiopia, of course. Yeah, I went to Addis Ababa University. I studied law. So I became a graduate assistant as soon as I graduated. So I never practiced law. And after, I think, 2 years as a graduate assistant, I had to go to the US for graduate studies. And then I came back and resumed my academic career. But in the middle of my academic career, opportunity presented itself in the form of some of my colleagues in the ruling party back then, proposing that I join the government in a not so prominent position, of course. So I was basically in the business of producing written material, strategic review of sorts on a number of issues. So I got off to a good start when it comes to the issue of Horn of Africa. So most of my focus was the region. And so yeah, that's how I found myself in active politics. Although I never considered myself a politician of
why
typical
is that?
I have always considered myself someone with an intellectual bent, academic bent. Mm-hmm. Of course, it would involve all sorts of analysis, and you're not going to be immune to political issues. But to assume the position of a full-time politician, that never crossed my mind.
And you recently left your role as the president of the Tigray region, and I definitely want to get into that. A lot of our viewers aren't necessarily familiar with Ethiopia or the Horn of Africa in general. So if we zoom out a little bit, can you talk about how significant the Horn is in 2025? I mean, we're here in the Gulf. Obviously, the Horn of Africa is just across the Red Sea. There's a lot of activity happening in this part of the world, and Ethiopia in particular is building bridges with countries here in the Gulf and elsewhere as well. So how do you kind of view the role of the Horn at the moment?
Well, the role of the Horn, the geography has its own story to tell. All the countries in the Western Red Sea region do not only have historic ties with the Eastern Red Sea region and the Gulf of Aden and the Arabian Peninsula. Mm-hmm. But whatever developments transpire in this part of the world, one way or another affects the rest of the world. This is one of the busiest sea lanes in the world. and tremendous economic activities take place, and anything that affects that sea lane will also affect the peace, stability, and security of the entire region, of course, for stronger reasons also that affects the peace and security of the entire world. And this part of the world also, demographically speaking, has one of the largest populations in the world. Ethiopia alone has about 125 million people. And the combined numerical strengths of the Horn of Africa region in terms of economic development and opportunities for economic development, not only for the people in the Horn of Africa, but also beyond, including the Gulf, the Middle East, and Europe, makes it very critical player in world and regional politics. And of course, any crisis in the Horn would also impact, for example, migration, whatever issues in Europe. Anything that happens in this part of the world, one way or another, affects any other country halfway across the world. So, but more importantly, some of the most important, some of the most critical challenges that we face today, including terrorism, including fundamentalism, poverty, economic development, or lack thereof. These are things that one way or another remain critical challenge in this region, but they also go beyond that region and affect other parts of the world and vice versa.
One of the biggest events, I think, in the region, whether we're talking about East Africa or maybe Horn of Africa specifically, and certainly in the last couple of weeks, the inauguration of the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam. Obviously, this is a project that's been debated over the last couple of years. Egypt has not always been very happy with the project. How significant is the Grand Renaissance Dam for Ethiopia to realize its full potential? Is this something that really over time you and your peers in the government think is going to transform the entire economy?
Oh, it's very significant. You know, yes, it has serious impact on the economic development endeavors of the country. That's one thing, but
because the capacity, it'll have enough capacity to cater to the whole country and beyond.
Yes.
Correct.
But the most important aspect of the Renaissance Dam is the kind of example it sets to the rest of the world that we were able to build the largest possible dam on the Nile without having to seek the financial support of the rest of the world. It would send the signal that it would be foolhardy for the international community to try and stop us from building other projects which are far less significant than the Renaissance Dam. So this is the largest possible dam that could be built on the Nile. And
we just want to be clear, this was financed by Ethiopians themselves,
yes,
and the diaspora. Obviously, we had Trump take credit for it a couple of weeks ago.
He
misspoke.
I have no problem with President Trump trying to take credit for anything and everything, and let him take the credit.
Right.
I don't think it would be. Would detract from
sure,
the reality of the dam itself. So, so we were able to build the dam on our own. Okay, so other possible projects over the dam, over the Nile, could only be far less significant than the Renaissance Dam. So it would be foolhardy for the Egyptians to try and to stop other projects which are far smaller than the Renaissance Dam. And I'll give you how important. I'll also give you additional examples how to show how important the Renaissance Dam was. Can
we just say, just to be clear for our listeners here, the issue for the Egyptians is they're arguing that obviously it's going to affect water security, not just in Egypt, but in Sudan as well.
You know, the Egyptians are steeped in the tradition of trying to establish that they are historically entitled to the exclusive use of Nile waters.
And they're citing a colonial era.
Oh yeah,
deal that was made.
That the colonial era treaties. Even the Egyptians didn't sign it. Didn't sign that treaty. Most of the colonial era treaties were signed by the British, both on behalf of the Egyptians, on behalf of the Sudanese, and probably the only one that was signed between two seemingly independent African nations, Egypt and Sudan, was the 1959 agreement. But it excluded Ethiopia. Now, the thing is, if the Nile, if the Egyptians insist that it is their historic right to maintain exclusive control over Nile waters, it defies geography, it defies common sense, it defies any notion of fair play or justice. So the thing is, Ethiopians have been living in misery for centuries on end, and of course, 86% of Nile waters comes from the Ethiopian highlands. Now the question is, if Ethiopia were to decide to divert Nile waters to the detriment of the Egyptians, that would be quite unjust. And no one in their right mind would condone that kind of practice, that kind of intention, much less a practice. So now the question is, there has to be the sense of realization on the part of the Egyptians and the Sudanese that just harping on the same old string that Egypt is entitled to its historic rights is almost meaningless. Now, the Egyptians are very clever. And of course, they have their own experts in every international institution. Even the whole idea of historic right doesn't, in fact, get much traction among the international community. So they come up with what they call water security. Water security is another form of arguing for historic rights. But granted that we have to make sure that Egyptians are not going to be affected. But they have to come to terms with the fact that Ethiopians also will have to use Nile waters. I'll give you an example. Tekeze, when we first built a dam over Tekeze, which the Sudanese called Atbara, which is another tributary to the Nile, the Sudanese realized that, well, despite their original uproar against the dam, they realized that the building of the dam in the highlands of Tigray,
your home region,
yes, simply meant that they were able to reclaim more than 250,000 hectares of land, which they could harvest year in and year out. So the added advantage for them was water was being regulated. Of course, some of the dams in Sudan, such as Rosris, Jebel Aulia, and all those places, they were full of siltation because of the amount of earth that comes to them from the highlands of Ethiopia. So with the dams being built upstream, the rate of siltation not only decreases, but at the same time, the water being regulated simply means that the Sudanese were able to harvest additional 250 hectares. With the Al-Nahda, with the Renaissance Dam, they will be able to harvest another 10 million hectares. So to the extent that there is an issue for the Egyptians to fret over, it's not going to be with Ethiopia, it's going to be with Sudan, because most of the benefit in terms of harvesting, in terms of using it for irrigation, could only accrue to Sudan, not Ethiopia, because the Renaissance Dam, it cannot be used for irrigation purposes because it's very close to the Sudanese border. So, but the problem with the Egyptian narrative is that they are frozen in a historic narrative that they cannot let go of, and things have changed and changed forever. So that's the kind of stuff what needs to take into account.
Are any of their concerns justified? Like, what happens if there's a drought, for example? Will that affect flow or not at all?
Well, if there is a drought, The drought doesn't particularly happen to Ethiopia; it happens to the rest of the world. I would tell you a Tigrinya saying where if a crisis befalls in the entire humanity, you might as well enjoy it as an opportunity. If it happens to you, it becomes a tragedy. But it happens to the rest of the world, it's going to be. But now the question is, if Egyptians, for example, were wise enough to wise up to changing circumstances, they would avoid, for example, the use of Nile waters as though they were being like harvested in their backyards. Why would Egyptians be in the business of, for example, harvesting rice, which more often than not requires a swampy land, and of course, huge amount of moisture and all that. And why would they be interested in building golf courses and everything? That requires tons of amount of water and all that. So their water management should be given a priority rather than trying to stop Ethiopia from using its fair share of the Nile resources. But it would be also quite irresponsible and, of course, unfair and unjust for Ethiopia to try to stop the Egyptians from getting their fair share of Nile waters.
I want to talk about your home region of Tigray. You were president of Tigray until recently. My understanding, and I know you don't like the language, but there was essentially a coup that led to your ousting. Can you just explain what happened, when it happened, and how that changed your life and what you're doing today? Because you're part of the federal government now instead of working for the regional government, right?
Yeah. Look, when we signed Pretoria because...
and that's the peace
agreement.
The peace agreement. To bring peace to Tigray after a 2-year-long...
devastating conflict.
Exactly.
I mean, it claimed the lives of hundreds, thousands of people.
They're saying that up to 600,000 people died.
Yes. Our fighters were very brave, and they fought as bravely as they could. And I'm really proud of the kind of stiff resistance they put up against the Eritreans, the Ethiopians, the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, the Eritrean Defense Forces, and assortment of militias from every region. We did fight. We believed that was an agenda worth fighting for. Okay, but it was obvious that we had reached end of the line, not because of lack of bravery of the rank and file fighters, but simply because the political leadership lost it big, myself included. We had made all kinds of miscalculations about how to go about the war. We decided, the leadership, the so-called Central Command, decided that we need to put a stop to the war because it was claiming the lives of. I'll give you a specific example.
And just to provide some context here as well, your party, the TPLF, used to be in charge of the federal government, right?
Yeah.
So it's very different running the country versus just running your home region.
We're not used to running smaller geographic entities such as Tigray, because Tigray had long been abandoned. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to soft whatever crisis all the investment, all the development happened in Addis. So when the leadership, myself included, it was myself and the president, then President Debretsion, were assigned to be in charge of Tigray first. But after the coming to the picture of the Prime Minister Abiy, against whom we really fought to the nail to stop him from getting elected. But fortunately or unfortunately for us, he got elected.
And now he's your boss and you have a good relationship.
Yeah,
how things change.
Things change, but that's beside the point. But what I'm saying is we fought really hard to stop him from becoming the prime minister, but he did. So, the most normal thing I would expect would be to come to terms with the fact that, don't meddle in our affairs, in our regional affairs, or we should exercise a level of autonomy that the Constitution grants us. And somehow we're not comfortable with the fact that there was this guy who we didn't want to become the prime minister, and then he's now the prime minister. He's making peace with Eritrea, and
which impacts you because you're sharing a border with Eritrea.
Yes, but more importantly, we thought he didn't have much public support, and that a tweak here, a tweak there could append his leadership. So the confrontation between the TPLF leadership and Prime Minister Abiy's leadership didn't see there was no end in sight when it comes to the kind of confrontation. But at some point, it became both TPLF and the prosperity. It became a prosperity. We didn't want to join Prosperity Party. We stuck to our EPRDF guns, and EPRDF, when we withdrew from the coalition, obviously we didn't want to become part of the Prosperity Party. That means the Prime Minister's agenda and my agenda became mutually exclusive. So to cut a long story short, it reached a point where the only way to resolve the issue was to fight it out. So we knew we were facing existential threat, because with the Eritreans joining hands with the federal government, the campaign against the TPLF and its leadership was almost a fait accompli. With us being determined to checkmate the Prime Minister, the kind of rapprochement people were trying to constructive engagement, trying to convince us to try, was virtually impossible. So it happened. So, but the war was grinding on for years, and like I said, we nearly marched on Addis. Although I personally was not particularly happy with this marching on Addis thing, because it's strange. TPLF had lost in the propaganda war throughout. Although TPLF and EPRDF have achieved tremendous progress in terms of transforming.
You were a very active spokesperson.
Yes, but then again,
in terms of international media.
You can speak as much as you want, as long as you want, as long as the people have, they could personally listen to me, but
you can't change the reality on the ground.
I can change the reality.
So, I mean, just to fast forward, obviously that conflict went on for 2 years. After that, there was an interim administration that's essentially still active.
That's why Pretoria was signed. But the signing of the Pretoria, everybody welcomed it, because it gave us a relief of sorts from the kind of carnage. I will tell you this. About 64 days into the last round of conflict, we lost a certain amount of casualties, fatalities. And the 10 days between my departure to Pretoria and the signing of the agreement, 10 days, we lost twice as many people as we did lose in 64 days. It shows you how difficult the situation was. But the thing is, we fought really hard. But the political leadership was supposed to do the kinds of thing. Well, he was supposed to provide supplies. It didn't.
When you say the political leadership, you're referring
to the TPLF leadership,
the TPLF,
myself included.
Right.
We had to be realistic. For example, we came up with a 7-point peace proposal. But when we saw that the situation on the ground was in our favor, and then we abandoned it altogether. I mean, it's not like the option for peace should be shelved simply because the developments on the ground seem to favor your advance on Addis. But Pretoria was signed much to the relief of the people of Tigray. And the decimation of the entire population was at least averted. The Eritreans had a fallout with Prime Minister Abiy simply because he signed the agreement. Because the Eritreans were publicly saying that they would stop at nothing to destroy the entire TPLF leadership, which for stronger reasons also means the entire population.
History.
Yes. And the hardliners in the Amhara were also insisting that this opportunity should not be wasted.
Yeah.
That they should finish off TPLF, and of course taking land in all kinds of things from Tigray and all that. So so it put a stop to it. So the arrangement was, well, the Prime Minister was clear, and he didn't want 5 of the executive committee members, myself included, to be the face of interim administration. But unfortunately, the then chairperson, I think he's still the chairperson of the party, or he claims to be.
You're not in touch daily anymore.
No, I'm not. And I am so much the better for that.
You became the president, and then you were running the region alongside the TPL leadership, correct?
Yes, I was part of the leadership. I was trying to accommodate them, but the TPLF is steeped in the tradition of totalitarian control of everything.
And you've talked about this before, how there's sort of a disconnect between, I think, a generational disconnect, you would say?
But I don't want to dwell much on it, because I know of people who belong to that generation who are not fugitives from reality,
right,
who want to come to terms with reality, unvarnished one. But the problem is the TPLF leadership. I'm an outlier of sorts, but even me, with that outlier status, we're not immune to the kind of totalitarian tendencies that. So, but I realized when I became the president, it was impossible, because it was supposed to be an inclusive administration, and I cannot take dictates from 4 members who are absolutely misguided about everything. They don't have the gray matter. They don't have a clear idea of what the world thinks about them.
Right.
They don't have any clear idea, even the foggiest idea of what it means to be in charge of Tigray, and what it means to try to extricate these people out of the kind of destruction and misery that the war wrought on the people of Tigray.
What were the dynamics like? Because obviously you were president, so you reported into the federal government and the prime minister ultimately, whereas the rest of the party did not. So, I mean,
the thing is, I would consult them on a number of issues, but I would want to. But they're not used to being consulted. They're used to
being in charge,
dictating. So every time they would call a meeting. And under normal circumstances, executive committee meetings happen in 3 months, once in 3 months. And I told them, I'm not going to be meeting with you guys. I mean, the forums, the meetings are the most useless exercises in rhetorical pushback against anything that I come up with. Against, and even it's not even of substance. The confrontation and the argumentation is not over substance. It's mostly on style, on optics, and all that. So they say, okay, they want to decide over personnel choices. They want to impose not just bureau heads, but also deputy heads, agency administrators, directors, and everything. And the TPLF leadership, the executive committee, wanted to dictate everything. So I would have none of it.
How did that relationship fall apart earlier in the year when you ultimately vacated that role as president?
If we had been successful in leading the resistance, we probably would have gone along better. I should think, because we failed, and miserably so. Everybody was trying to find someone to blame for their failure. So this time around, the notion of collective leadership simply meant that they should stand in the way of everything the president does, simply because he doesn't take orders from them. Okay, I said no. To the extent that I have to accommodate their ideas, they have to come up with meaningful proposals. Like, they don't come up with meaningful proposals. Their idea of what it means to govern is to control everything, and that was absolutely unrealistic. And with that, they started sabotaging the entire process, because, if I have appointed a district level governor, and then they would insist that most of the rank and file is picked by the TPLF, and so the interim administration was not able to achieve anything at all, because every arrangement we're trying to make with the federal government, every arrangement we're trying to make with international community, whatever, was being blocked. And another challenge was, even one of my deputies, who's now the president, had his own ambitions as well. Tigray is a very small region, but I've steeped in the history of glorifying martial tradition and all that. So we have more than 200,000 combatants.
Maybe too small of a region for that many egos.
And hundreds of generals and colonels who now found themselves in a situation where they can say yes and no to decisions by government. And then can add to that mix the fact that we all believed that something needs to be blamed for the kind of situation we find ourselves in. So it became a war of almost a Hobbesian war of all against all. Exhausting. In that situation, why would the federal government, for example, try to step into the plate and try to address this issue? We're just tearing each other apart. And the problem is the TPLF leadership can never learn from its mistakes. And the right thing to do was, I have been insisting that for the five of us, at least executive committee members, to publicly apologize for our failures and vacate the scene.
To the people, to the population.
To the people, vacate the scene.
Can we talk about the status of peace in Tigray specifically? Because there's been a lot of talk earlier this year about a potential return to war, and everyone is saying that peace is very fragile because there are several elements of the Pretoria Agreement that haven't been fully implemented.
Yes.
Correct? One of them is allowing internally displaced people to return to their homes. So you're no longer the president, but obviously you're from the region. You're very passionate about your people.
Yeah.
What are the main challenges everyday people have at the moment in Tigray?
Look, the people of Tigray. People really love their peace. I've been to every village in Tigray, not just as a president, later as a president, but even before that. And after the president, every woman would tell me, one of my security guards was killed in a drone attack in my residence. I went to see his mother after signing Pretoria. And she wasn't crying when I tried to give him some money or something. But she didn't care about the money. But the fact that I signed the deal, obviously couldn't save her son. He's already been martyred. But she told me, I'm happy that his younger brothers would not have to go through the kind of days and carnage that they had to go through. And this is the kind of message I've been hearing. But unfortunately, my colleagues were not particularly sensitive to that part of the people's demands, right? So every colonel, every politician, especially the most disgruntled ones, are the ones who have a sense of entitlement to power. Not just in Tigray. Some of them are unrealistic enough to entertain the illusion that they could one day, and probably one day soon, be in the corridors of power in Addis. And they have been trying to convince the prime minister that he better work with them than with me or with other people. These are people who do not have the courage of their own conviction, but at the same time would put people in harm's way simply to achieve whatever ugly ambitions they have. It's absolute control over resources, absolute control over everything and anything in Tigray. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to take advantage of the plight of the people to push their agenda. In fact, their saber rattling and everything was alarming, and I knew for a fact that wasn't going to work. For me, I was trying to convince the fighters that to put the peace of their people first, the interest of their people first. So what you see is a situation where most of the fighters are voting by their feet. They are leaving their barracks and joining other elements who are not interested in fighting the Tigrayans, but more importantly, to make sure that the very people who want to profit here from yet another round of conflict do not have the wherewithal, do not have the resources to start another stupid war again. So I will continue to work with the federal government to try and impress on them that there is no point for them to try and use force against Tigray. And that peace is in the best interest of our people, and that our people are mostly interested in resolving whatever issues we have the federal government peacefully. And the issue of internally displaced people, yes, the federal government was dragging its feet for a long time, but when it comes right down to it, my leadership, members of the TPLF leadership, were as much to blame for it as it is the federal government. In the final analysis, it came down to whether these people who believed they were robbed of the position they were entitled to, simply because I was a TPLF member, I got elected by one margin. I didn't even vote for myself, but they were angry because I'm not the kind of guy they could give orders to.
So we have a few more questions that I really want to get to, and we're running very short on time, so we only have a few more minutes. How would you, and just quickly if you can, how would you describe the relationship with Eritrea, between Eritrea and the TPLF leadership currently?
You see, I had started the engagement with the Eritreans as an interim president. My hope was that another round of conflict, whether it involved the Eritreans or the Ethiopian federal government, would be a nightmare scenario for Tigray. So I was trying to make sure that there was that rapprochement of sorts without necessarily having to abandon the issue of accountability and all that. But the leadership, the older leadership of the TPLF assumed that me working with the Eritreans and at the same time working with the federal government was too much to handle. So they wanted to take advantage of the situation and they started working. But the Eritreans are very clever, and they know that they don't have the numerical advantage to fight the federal government head on. So they want to use whatever opportunity presents itself, to use useful idiots the other side of their border, to the south of their border, including Tigray, the Fano and other people, to destabilize the country. That's pretty much what they want to do, because they don't mince their words when it comes to their intentions. And so what the TPLF leadership right now is doing is to try to shove this new reality up your throat, down your throat, that the Eritreans are our brothers. Well, Eritreans are our brothers, but the Eritrean leadership under President Isaias was in the forefront of committing the kinds of crimes that the people of Tigray had to suffer.
And that's also making quite the statement towards the federal government.
That's what
having that kind of relationship.
That's what I'm talking
those
about.
Doors.
And you should see. So what the TPLF leadership is trying to do is to see if aligning, alliance with the Eritreans could save them from a real or perceived threat from the federal government. But the best approach for me is to try and work closely with the federal government to draw on the diplomatic support of the international community to try and focus on the full implementation of the Pretoria Agreement, rather than trying to find another ally which has never come to terms with the fact that it committed the kinds of heinous crimes that were visited upon the people of Tigray. Now, what the Eritreans are trying to do, is to make sure that the conflict goes southwards. So rather than confronting the federal government, whatever its intentions are, in the Eritrean border, because they don't have the numerical advantage, they don't have the technological advantage and all that, they want to send the conflict away from their borders, and it was going to be either in Tigray or on Amhara. So if some conflict erupts, then at the expense of the people of Tigray. That is going to happen at the expense of the people. That's what I don't want to see. That's why I will fight to the nail against my erstwhile comrades, because what they are trying to do is to invite the federal government to fight whatever war, whatever conflict it might have in Tigray. And that would only happen at the expense of the people of Tigray, at the expense of my sisters, at the expense of my brothers, at the expense of my parents. That I would fight to the nail as long as I'm alive.
Another issue that's in the news right now is the U.S. potentially recognizing Somaliland. And obviously, a couple of years ago, there was that MOU between the federal government and Somaliland. So if recognition comes, what does that mean for Ethiopia in terms of potential Red Sea access, which is a big priority for your government?
I would address this by alluding to a conversation Prime Minister Meles had with an English diplomat about 15 years ago. And the British were insisting on Ethiopia recognizing Somaliland because Somaliland is their colony. So Meles had to tell them that he won't be
former colony.
Yeah, former colony. So the Prime Minister told the British diplomat that Ethiopia will not be the first to recognize Somaliland. But he added, for good measure, that it won't be the third either. So if the Americans recognize Somaliland, I don't think other countries will have difficulty following suit. Well, it will create opportunities for Ethiopia.
Is that a route for Red Sea access?
Yeah, well, it's a route to sea access. The problem is this whole idea of Red Sea access, sea access, is often confused with ownership of real estate and all that. So, you know, we're caught in translation, as it were. But whether we like it or not, 130 million people, whether Abiy likes it or not, whether it's a combustible material. At some point in time, people would feel that they need to have access to the sea, no matter what sort of arrangement is going to take. So it would rather be wise for people to realize that one way or another something got to give, and of course any sensible Eritrean, including the government, should understand that some kind of give and take is well in order. But hopefully we can, and we should try to avoid a descent into all-out war. That's the best I can hope for under circumstances. But I am also a hard-nosed realist, and I know that once the worms are out of the can, I don't think you can find a larger can to recount the can once the worms are out.
We're running short on time, and there's a lot of other issues I wanted to get into, but we'll have to pick this up in Addis at some point. What are your biggest hopes for Ethiopia in the years ahead? There's a lot going on. There's a geopolitical movement. There's the economy. You're in the middle of an IMF reform program. What do you see? What are your wishes for Ethiopia and your expectations in the next few years?
Well, I mean, to put it in a nutshell, I want to see Ethiopia grow economically, become stable, and of course accommodate the political diversity of all sorts, not political, but also demographic, ethnic, and whatever diversity. And
people living together in peace.
Yes, and I want, more specifically, for example, the people of Tigray to enjoy their full measure of autonomy, including, of course, their right to secession if things come to that. But more importantly, to avoid the kind of conflict that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. And I think, in my own small way, I would be more than glad to contribute to making sure that whatever conflict there is, or whatever tendency there is for people to try and get their will done through violence, is checked, not through violence, but through constructive engagement and through peaceful dialogue. That's my hope. And of course, my expectation, as long as the intention is there, as long as we have reason to believe that the pluses that we have now could be further strengthened, and the minuses can be dealt with, and then there is no reason why we should not channel our resources to that end. But oftentimes it's easier said than done.
ጌታቸው ረዳ, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you to our viewers for tuning in to another episode of Global Powershift. Don't forget that you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube, and that's at Global Powershift. I'll be back next month with my co-host Suzanne Kianpour. Until then, thanks for tuning in.